Have you ever watched a movie and was struck with the feeling of purpose? Like when coming out of the theater, you felt like you were just going to go back and jump into the screen and into its world? This is the creative difference that video games offer to the world. The ability to fully immerse yourself instead of just being a viewer. But how do games manage to pull off this feat? Well, they offer a variety of different ways to engage the player and appeal to different types of people. According to a research article published by Amsterdam University Press, as cultural artifacts, digital games are full of meaning, and, whether or not they are designed with persuasive intentions, they always convey a message that can be interpreted by their players. In this video, different games will be presented along with their style, story, and communication with the player. With that, let's get into our first example. In Hollow Knight, you play as a little bug in the huge underground world of Hallownest. As you explore the world, you immediately find yourself lost in ancient caverns, tunnels, and civilizations. While you find your way through gameplay, you come across locations like ancient gardens, a huge, empty city and palace, all plagued and infected with bugs that used to be sentient like you. The more you play, the more questions fill your mind about what happened to this once great civilization. Answers come through scarce dialogue with the few sentient bugs left untouched by the infection. This is what Hollow Knight does best. While there's a main focus on gameplay, the story is always there in the background. With hardly any exposition, much of what happens is left up to the imagination of the player. Each time you enter a new area, title names pop up at the edge of the screen. Because they're the most consistent text in the whole game, those title pop-ups also play a big role in the imagination tugging. Locations like the White Palace, City of Tears, and the Resting Grounds set the tone immediately as you, the player, figure out what the story of the area is. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a masterclass in open-world exploration. Similarly to Hollow Knight, you emerge into the world with vague objectives. You play as Link, a knight who was put into a 100-year-long coma in the aftermath of a war that left the current kingdom in ruins. Waking with amnesia, Link is just as lost as the player is. As you progress in the story, it is fed to the player through dialogue, much more direct than Hollow Knight. What's unique about Breath of the Wild is its use of optional cutscenes. Scattered across the kingdom are cutscenes in the form of Link's lost memories. The player can choose to seek out these memories to get a better understanding of the character's personal struggles and moments. They can range from a lighthearted fun to sorrowful, emotional dialogues, each intended to be viewed not in order, but out of it. The game developers realized that there would be no way to control the path of the player, so each memory is intended to be out of place, though all of them combine into a linear story. This design choice further simulates amnesia in how memories don't come back in a coherent line, but mixed and jumbled. Take a look at this one.
How did it come to this? The divine beasts, the guardians, they've all turned against us. It was Calamity Ganon. It turned them all against us. And everyone, Mipha, Urbosa, Rivali and Daruk, they're all trapped inside those things. It's all my fault. Our only hope for defeating Ganon is lost, all because I couldn't harness this cursed power. Everything I've done up until now, it was all for nothing. So I really am just a failure. All my friends, the entire kingdom, my father most of all. I tried and I failed them all. I left them
In this memory scene, Link consoles Zelda, the princess he's sworn to protect. Zelda, however, has just failed to protect everyone. Through the memories, we learn Zelda's struggle to control the ancient power she was born with, the only thing keeping the kingdom from destruction. In this scene, we see her emotional aftermath of her failure to control her power, setting up the ruined kingdom that the player explores in the game 100 years later. In Celeste, you play as Madeline, a stubborn, novice climber who's fixed on climbing Celeste Mountain. It's an ominous mountain that has an air of mystery about it. Story and gameplay have their own places. When a level ends, the story begins. Throughout levels, there's also dialogue that strings along with the gameplay. But the main style of this game is story, gameplay, etc. In Celeste's story, Madeline goes through the trials of conquering the mountain while also conquering herself. Literally, a duplicate of her ill will forms and torments her throughout certain parts of the game. Not only does this copy of Madeline act as a story device, she also acts as a gameplay gimmick, chasing the player around and forcing them to restart the level if she tags you. In one scene, Madeline and a friend she meets on her journey become trapped on a gondola. The gondola malfunctions, causing Madeline to have a severe panic attack. There's a real focus on this scene, and it shows how unstable Madeline is, while also simulating what an attack is like. In the end, her friend Theo helps her by using a breathing technique with a feather, and the gondola eventually begins to move again. In the later game, this feather also becomes an item that allows Madeline to soar to new heights, and she believes she can finally overcome her evil twin. Instead, the twin scoffs at her, saying she can't just live without her other half. Proceeds to force the two all the way into the center of the mountain, destroying all of Madeline's progress. Madeline is determined to get back and finish what she started. But she also realizes that she can't do it while also battling herself at the same time. The two fight and eventually become one with each other, allowing the player to level up and perform an extra dash, which is an essential part of gameplay. With her coming to terms with herself, Madeline has everything she needs to conquer the mountain. Celeste's biggest strength is its ability to create gameplay from what's happening in the story. And the story itself, maybe you've guessed, is about mental health. Climbing the mountain and dealing with your evil clone are just two of the analogies the writers use to tie in mental health issues. Madeline is flawed, and the mountain is unforgiving. Together, it creates a journey any player would both be mechanically and emotionally invested in. Now I'd like to welcome our guest, Tony. Tony, welcome for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, I want to ask you the question, how do games build their worlds and characters through direct and indirect storytelling? Or rather, is there a specific game that comes to mind?
Yeah, I played a ton of video games. I think whenever I think about storytelling within video games, my mind immediately jumps to the Ace Attorney series, which is unfamiliar, visual novel series where you sort of play as a lawyer.
Do you think you could give us sort of like a rundown of what the series is and like, you know, who are the characters, what are they doing? Just for people who might not know.
Yeah, that's important. So, at least for what I'm going to talk about, it stars Phoenix Wright. He's a new, fresh defense attorney. There's Miles Edgeworth, who's going to be very important. He's the prosecutor. He's kind of like Phoenix's like rival per se. And there's Maya Fey, which is Phoenix's assistant, whose older sister was Phoenix's mentor who gets murdered early on, and their mother is someone by the name of Misty Faye. This is all going to be important for later. When missing, and that's what caused Phoenix's mentor to want to be a defense attorney. And the way the game works is, like I said, it's a visual novel where you play as a lawyer. So it's split into two different parts. There's the court scenes, and then there's the investigation scenes. So what it works is you start off with like investigation, where you figure out who your client is, what their story is, who got murdered, why do they think your client is guilty, and so then you just do a bit of investigating, you find some evidence, and then after a little bit of time, you go into court, and then that's where you have like the cross-examination part, where you bring in a witness. They'll testify, and you need to try. Really, what it boils down to is trying to find something in their testimony that contradicts a piece of evidence. And then usually works is like the witness will either tell a lie or just be misinformed, and then that unravels. It's like, okay, and so that's sort of like the basis premise. Do you want more? Is that sufficient?
No, I think that's good. But yeah, okay. So it's simulating a courtroom, and you are the defendant.
At least for this series. No, you are Phoenix, right? You are the defense attorney.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what I mean by this is it builds off. In the second case in the first game, Mia Fey, who was Phoenix's mentor, gets murdered, and that's, like I said, second case, very early on. Fast forward to the final climactic case. Really, Mia Fey being murdered kicks off the whole trilogy, because so many different events ultimately end up happening because Mia ended up getting murdered.
It's a catalyst.
For example, in the third game, there's this new prosecutor named Godot, and you have no idea who Godot is. He has a mask. He's very cryptic. Like he says to Phoenix, when he introduces himself to Phoenix, he goes, "I've returned from the ghastly depths of hell to battle you." And Phoenix is like, "Do you want to explain that?" And then he never does. So you're like, and he absolutely hates Phoenix, and you have no idea why. You don't know who this dude is. You don't know why he hates Phoenix. He also had never been a prosecutor until the third game. So you have no idea like who this guy is. However, and then as you play through the game, it eventually gets revealed that Godot was Mia Fey's boyfriend. And before Mia got murdered, someone had tried to murder Godot. His name was originally Diego Armando. So someone poisoned him. He gets put in a coma. And by the time he wakes up, Mia had already been murdered. And so he blames Phoenix for Mia's death, saying, "Oh, he should have been the one to protect Mia." And the reason he does it is because he blames himself for not being able to protect Mia, and he just can't find him to forgive himself. So he's kind of just projecting on the Phoenix. So he became a prosecutor to be able to get back at Phoenix, so he could, quote, expose Phoenix for being the fraud that he is, and try to just tear him down, because he thinks that's what's going to help him. And then the final climactic case, the person murdered was Misty Fey, Maya, and Mia's mother. And the point I'm trying to make is like, the reason this is all something that had been building up through 3 games. Like Mia dying is what kicked off
all of this.
Mia dying is what kicked off all this. And more specifically, it kicked off Godot's hatred for Phoenix. Phoenix was in a hospital for a brief period of time during this case, so he wasn't able to actually do his job. So he called Miles Edgeworth, who's the prosecutor, like I said, kind of like rival, but like they're really friends. But like at first, Miles and Phoenix, like when they were like young kids, but then Miles' dad got murdered. So then he like left schools, and then when he re-met Phoenix in the courtroom for the first time, he absolutely hated Phoenix. But then through like the events of the first game, Miles was able to work through his grief, work through a lot of things, and became friends with Phoenix again. So he saw that something happened in the first game leading up. It wasn't, if that had not happened, we don't know what would happen, because Miles wouldn't have had, Phoenix wouldn't have had Maya's help. In the second game, the second case, Maya's aunt devises a plan to try and frame Mia Fey for murder. However, that gets stopped. And so then the final case, the reason why Dahlia was trying to murder Maya to begin with is Dahlia is Morgan Fey's daughter, who is the aunt that tried to kill Maya. So then they devised So then she still wanted revenge, and she's on Maya. So then they devised the plan. So something happened in the second game is also leading into the third game.
There's a line that connects
there's a line. It's like every time you play a case, there's something to do. At least there's a couple like exceptions, but for the most part, every case, something from the previous case, and is important for what's currently going on.
And how is all of this? I mean, this huge, even just with this trilogy, this huge story, how is it communicated to the player?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at. It's communicated because, let's say, it's a visual novel, so it is
so it's dialogue.
It's dialogue. It is direct storytelling, but it's really cool. It's just like when this gets communicated to you, it's also getting communicated to to like the people in the universe, so you can see their reaction. Like you can like there's a couple like moment like for example, in the second game, fourth case, Maya gets kidnapped, and like the music just goes. I also think there is a little bit of indirect too, because the music in the Ace Attorney is I'm trying to think of the best way with this. The music within Ace Attorney is constantly changing to fit what's going on. Like there's like
it accompanies
like yeah, and so like it switches like it's constantly switching to match the tone. Like the music like honestly sets the tone sometimes. Like I know, okay, this is like dramatic because there's like some dramatic music playing, or this is an intense moment because this is like really banging tune playing right now. So it is mostly direct because it is using dialogue. And the dialogue specifically is usually the conversations between characters.
Do the characters feel very human?
Yeah, like, they do.
Like when you were saying something like when something happens and the characters react alongside it, does it feel like, you're kind of in the room with them? Like you're right there?
Yeah, because I remember there was this one part, it's second case, fourth game. The person you're defending, it actually turns out that they didn't murder the person, however, they hired an assassin, so they are guilty. And then that gets revealed later on, and it's just like and like I remember playing it, I was like, oh my god, like that's insane. And then I remember Phoenix Wright, he like, I remember it was right before the final trial in that case, where he goes, I'm walking into a courtroom to defend a murderer, and there's this other part where you need to make a decision, and Phoenix is like lying down with his head like this, like he doesn't know what to do.
There's conflict.
And it's like gives you the player the choice. Do you testify that say he's guilty? But if you do that, Maya's got kidnapped, and the person who killed the actual assassin kidnapped Maya, and I was blackmailing Phoenix, saying, "Get my client an acquittal, or I will murder Maya." So it's either say, "Hey, he's guilty," and let Maya die, or say he's not guilty, let a murderer walk free, and let someone else, because there's no point. Someone else was about to be proven guilty, and let someone else have to go to prison for a crime they didn't commit. And so Phoenix is there with his head down, head in his hands, and I remember sitting there being like,
"Yeah, what would you do?"
What do I pick? Like I don't know. Like how do I don't even I was like, what do I pick here? I'm like, is this going to have an outcome? Is this going to change the game? Like I don't know what to do here. And so I think you definitely feel like I think because of the music and because of just the dialogue between the characters, where you're just like, there's many times where I'm like, oh my god, it's so like, yeah. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask, you're sort of getting into it. What are the bigger themes in this? I mean, I guess we can just stay in this this series if you want to, the 3 game. Yeah. But like, sure, justice is there, but like, what else is there?
Yeah, a big thing is about basically there's a lot. I mean, at least for me, my personal common answer, but at least for me, one of my biggest my biggest takeaway in terms of themes is I'm trying to think of the best way to win this. Is this like,
you can take a minute if you need to.
Let me actually tell you a story. This will maybe better. Climax of the final game, it's getting to like near the end, and then Phoenix, it comes to a point where Phoenix says it's like, the question isn't, I forget exactly what they were talking about here, but there's a line It's not a question of whether I can prove it. The fact of the matter is I have to prove it. It's one of the rules of being a lawyer. So basically what he's trying to saying is like, my client is being accused of murder. Like, it's getting to the point where it's like, I can't think to myself, oh my God, what if I can't do it? The fact of the matter is you have to do it. There's no choice. You have to prove them innocent. Proving them not innocent, getting them a guilty verdict, that's out of the question. So you can't just throw any thoughts related to what you would do if they're found guilty. Those go out. It's simply, just the point of that line is there's some technical point, like, you have to prove them.
So you could say dedication.
Yeah, dedication, because there's a lot of points like that where it's like it's getting kind of tense and Phoenix kind of needs to like lock in, and it's just sort of like, look, it's not a matter of can I do this or not. I simply have to do it. So I think that's sort of a big thing, is like not feeling sorry for yourself and just being like, and finding a way, figuring it out, saying you cannot, not accomplishing this is not an option. So I think that's basically the big thing, is just really maybe this feeling of not feeling sorry for yourself. I'd also say like this too is another thing, is looking at things from a different angle, because that's sort of like a big
in terms of keeping an open mind.
I'm gonna when faced with a challenge, maybe attack. It's like when you're faced with a challenge, think of things with a different angle of how to deal with said challenge. Like, for example, like that's something like Phoenix's mentor, Mia Fey, said that all the time to him, and that's something that Phoenix is constantly reminding myself. Because anytime he's stuck and he's like, I'm looking at the evidence, I'm not seeing anything. It's like, okay, I need to look at this evidence from a different angle. And one example of this is in the fourth case of the first game. There was a murder, and at the scene of the crime, there was only one bullet found. And it was the person that it was found inside the victim. But then Phoenix alleged, well, there actually was a second bullet there. And Phoenix was like, what do I do? I'm not sure. And he wasn't able to prove it. And he's like, but then you got to mind, okay, I need to think of this from a different angle. I can't think of this. Why isn't the second bullet at the scene of the crime? Why did the bullet have to leave the scene of the crime? Why did the murderer have to take the bullet with him? And then Phoenix concluded, because the murderer himself was also shot. And then the person the murderer actually still had the bullet lodged in his shoulder, and Phoenix had like a metal detector. And so in the middle of the courtroom,
that'd be a cool scene.
They use the metal detector over him, and then it starts beeping at his shoulder, and it gets proven that, and the bullet matched the other bullet that's found at the scene of the crime. So I think that's another big theme, is just
thinking outside the box.
Thinking outside the box, like so I think the big theme is like, I think both of those kind of go into like one larger theme, is like, how do you deal with challenge? Like, what do you do when faced with adversity? Like, how do you overcome obstacles? And I think both of those. So I would say that's really like the bigger theme, because I think both of those sort of go into it, where it's like the big. So yes, the big theme is really just how to deal with challenge. And another thing that maybe not gets talked about too much, and that's in those three games, but definitely more in other games, is really just the theme of like the truth is going to come out. Like, you can obscure it, you can try to hide it, but even sometimes if the truth is dangerous, the truth is can have repercussions, it's going to come out, and you simply have to find the truth, even if it's harmful. Because like I said, like in the final case I was talking about, when Godot murdered Misty Fey, he was doing it to protect Maya, because all he saw was Dahlia Hawthorne. And there was even a part where Maya was like, even though this person murdered Maya's mom, she was trying to defend, she was trying to lie in court to protect him. But in this line, he's like, even though his motives might have been pure, I have to find the truth. It's one of the rules of being a lawyer. I have to do it.
So there has to be that justice that always comes around.
Like, even if you did the wrong thing for the right reason, they're all going to have to still be penalties for it. And for whatever the motive, even if you have the purest motive, the fact is this is what happened, and people need to know what happened.
Whether you're a fan of action-packed platforming, exploration, or getting to the bottom of the truth, you're bound to run into elements that communicate a story to you. Characters, exposition, music, flavor text, and style each have their own voice, and video games are the microphone that amplifies these devices to millions everywhere. Princess Zelda never says she's sad, but the tremble in her voice and her body language does. Hollow Knight's world never tells you its complete history, yet it makes you wonder deep down what it was. Madeline never says aloud, "I'm flawed," yet her anxiety on the gondola speaks volumes. In all these examples, there's one central focus: you, the player. You're right there with the characters as the story unfolds. So the next time you pick up a game, or maybe even the first time, take some time to think about how it communicates to you, and why it makes you feel certain ways. Storytelling is everywhere in video games, from the smallest text box to the largest open world. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching!